Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend our webinar today, Crucial Year-End Giving Strategies for Your Nonprofit Appeal. We're very excited to welcome Mazarine Treyz today. Mazarine is the author of Wild Woman's Guide to Fundraising and The Wild Woman's Guide to Social Media, two must-reads for the nonprofit fundraisers. And keep an eye out for her newest book, Get the Job, Your Fundraising Career Empowerment Guide. She's also raised over $1 million for all sizes of nonprofit organizations via grants, events, appeals, and more. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we begin. First, we're going to be live tweeting during today's presentation using the hashtag YEGiving, so please join the conversation. And second, we're happy to take questions from you all during the presentation. We'll try to answer as many as we can before our time is up, but if we don't get to all of your questions, don't worry. We'll be posting a list of the answers on our GuideStar blog at trust.guidestar.org a couple of days after this webinar. Mazarine, take it away.
Thanks very much, Jenny. I really appreciate that. Everyone, thanks so much for being here today. I want to give a shout-out to my friend Joan, who is on the call. Say, hey, Joan. And for everybody here I don't know yet, I hope I will soon. My contact info is going to be on the last slide, so if you want to ask me questions after the webinar today, feel free. As well as I want you to know that there's so many people on the webinar today that I am really excited to have all of your knowledge here, and I know that if you speak up and want to add something to what I've said or what's worked in your experience, I'm sure everyone here would love to learn as well from you and your experience too. So feel free to put your comments and suggestions in the Q&A or the chat as we go along, so that at the end we can sort of read what you've said and hopefully learn from you too. So this is me. I'm the presenter, and I've written a few books, done some stuff. I've co-founded a nonprofit called the Moon Balloon Project in 2005. And I started fundraising in 2001. I've been through these various places. I've had these various clients. But the main thing I want you to take away from today is that this is the best time of year to ask for individual gifts from your constituents and your supporters. And I'm really looking forward to helping you be even more successful in the next couple of months. So now let's get to know more about you. Enough about me. The first poll question is, have you started your year-end appeal yet? We're going to keep it up for about 20 seconds. The first answer is, lol, no. The second one is, yes, but we don't know what we're doing. Then C is, yes, but we have a really small list. D is, yes, but last year we didn't do that well. Or E, we're already done. Seriously? Excellent. And there will be jokes today. So the joke on this poll is, have you seen this bird? Because they are everywhere. So you can see here on the screen, and I hope you're not clicking away. Anyway, so after about 20 seconds have elapsed, we're going to show the results, and I'm going to let Jenny and Connie let me know when that is. All right, would you close the poll, please? Would you share the results? Excellent. So it looks like here, 28% of us have not started our appeals yet. 15% of us said, yes, but we don't know what we're doing. 21% of us said, yes, but we have a really small list. And others said, yes, but last year we didn't do that well. And 7% of us said, we're done already. So about a quarter of us said no. And about half of us said yes, but we have a small list and we didn't do that well. So I hope today will be useful for you and for those who are done already. High fives all around. And I hope that you can learn something today. But for everyone else, for the rest of us, I think you will learn something. Next question for you. What are you hoping to get out of this webinar? So please answer this question. Are you, A, hoping to learn how to get more money with your year-end appeal? B, learn how to tell a story with your appeal? C, something else? Or D, the magic treasure app that shows the way to riches? What are you hoping to get out of the webinar today? Let's keep this open for about another 15 seconds. Oh, I just noticed it says La Côte du Squelette, which means the coast of the skeleton. All right, poll has ended. Let's see the results here. I'd like to know what you'd like to get out of the webinar today. Sorry, it just takes a little minute for this to populate. Excellent. So most people want how to get more money, as we suspected. 67% of us want that. 19% of us want to learn how to tell a story with your appeal. 2% want something else. And 12% of us are jokers. The magic treasure map that shows the way to which is excellent. Well, for all you jokers, I hope I can show you in a way how you can get money with your year-end appeal. And for all the rest of us, yes, that's what we're going to learn today. So you've come to the right place. Thanks a lot. Here's what we're going to learn: the different kinds of stories and how you can tell them for your cause. And by the way, this is not an exhaustive list of all the different kinds of stories. This is just a few of them that I hope you can use, and we'll be looking at examples as well. Appropriate fundraising pictures for your letter, what makes people give, how you can make your mission urgent for your donors, including how to sort of format your letter, as well as the verb choices you use, and again, the formatting mistakes people often make and how you can avoid them. And then how can you talk about your nonprofit's accomplishments in a donor-centered way? And why would you want to do that? So now some jokes. Michelle Wolf says, I want to know what love is. I want you to show me. Sits down in a conference room and waits for you to start a PowerPoint presentation. So I hope that you won't be clicking away the whole time that we're here. I hope you'll be coming back and looking at our jokes as well as things that we're sharing. It's a very visual presentation, so it's not just all me flapping my lips at you. Michelle Wolf also says, I brought peanut butter and a nice loaf of bread to a gunfight because I was hoping someone would bring a knife. So anyway, this is just some jokes that made me laugh on Twitter. This is a reality check. Last 2 months of the year and the last 2 weeks of December are prime time for you to be getting donations. According to Blackbaud, this is like when almost 25% of individual donations come in, both online and offline, for nearly every single kind of cause. So you want to be taking advantage of this time. But it's not just about the statistics. I want you to know that today we're going to be talking about stories because, according to Jonathan Gottstrahl, fiction seems to be more effective at changing beliefs than writing that is specifically designed to persuade through argument and evidence. So that's why you can remember really well the story that you read a few days ago versus, what the statistics were in your high school history class. When was the Battle of the Bulge fought? I bet probably somebody in here is like, oh, I already know that answer. But for me, I don't have a memory for dates and figures. I really have a memory for stories and how they made me feel. So that's something I want you to remember. If you take nothing else away from this presentation today, is that the story that you tell will have way more of an impact than any statistics that you say to people. And here is how I back this up. This is the research that says this. This is called the collapse of compassion, how we value human life. So on the bottom here, it's the number of lives that you mention in your letter, and then the value of the life that people give to it. So if you mention one life, people value it very highly. If you mention two, they value it less. If you mention 4 or 6, it starts to become kind of an insurmountable problem for them. And if you mention hundreds of thousands of lives, then people just don't care. So whether you say 30,000 people died in an earthquake in Pakistan or 300,000 people died in an earthquake in Pakistan, for people who are thousands of miles away from that, like we all are, it's really hard to get worked up about that. But if you say this one girl, Nala, died in this earthquake in Pakistan, suddenly it's like you can start to see this person. She was 16. She lived with her mother and father. She was studying to be a doctor. Then suddenly you're like, oh, this is a tragedy, which doesn't make any sense because it's a way bigger tragedy if there's more people. But because this is how our brains work, we're very focused on creating a one-to-one connection with other people. When you talk about one story, this is the power of one. This is what makes people want to give to you. So it's not just about people, though. We'll talk about how you can do this for other kinds of causes as well. But I want you to start thinking about, if you haven't already, that one story that you can tell about your cause and have it be focused around one person. So, for example, let's say that you are an arts and healthcare nonprofit and you go into hospitals and you help kids with cancer and you explore their help them express their feelings through words and pictures. So instead of saying, we do this, we do that, we do all these things, we paint with the kids, we draw with them, we give them sculpture to do, and when we dance with them or something like that, you want to say, this is Jenny. She is in the hospital for leukemia, and she's 8 years old, and she misses her schoolmates, and she, and so on and so forth. So it's really about that one story. I hope I've hammered this home. Now, how should you frame your story? A little bit about this. What makes donors take action? Here is a question for you. Now, this isn't a poll question, but I'm curious. Which call to action works better for getting a blood donation on the college campus? Is it, they said, if you give blood today, you can prevent a death. Or if you give blood today, you can save a life. Which one do you think is better for getting people to take action? According to the research, people are way more motivated by loss than by gain. This is by Eileen Chu and Keith Murnaghan. It's called Life or Death Decisions, Framing the Call for Help. And if you want the abstract for this, it will be in the end of the slides today. So people who agreed to help, but 50% of people agreed to help if you said you'll save a life. And about 65% of people agreed to help if they said you'll prevent a death. So if people feel like it's more urgent and framed negatively, they'll be much more likely to take action than if you say, oh, you could save a life. This is just their research. It may or may not hold true for your list and your audience, but it's worthwhile to even just split your list in half with the list that you have and check, which one of these works better, which one gets a better response. The different kinds of stories. Here's one kind of story. The Power of Myth in Hero with a Thousand Faces. Joseph Campbell says there's only one story, the story where the hero is thrown out of their home and they undergo a transformation, the struggling in the wilderness, and finally the triumphant return. Now, you may or may not agree with this, but I think we've all had that, as we've grown up. We've gone away from our families and our homes, and we've struck out into the wilderness, and we found our way, whether we went to college or whether we started in the working world. So that's something that we can all relate to, and you can do this with animals as well as with people, depending on what cause you have. I know we have lots of different causes on the line today, but think about how you could apply this kind of story to your cause. The hero is thrown out, undergoing a transformation, struggling in the wilderness, and the triumphant return. It could even be about a place in the land. The place has been, degraded by various kinds of waste, and then the place is transformed through your nonprofit, and it takes a really long time to clean up, the stream or the brush, the underbrush, things like that, and finally the triumphant return, the place is restored to its natural beauty. So, and then the animals and the plants come back, that sort of thing. So even a place can sort of take part in the story. This is, and as I said in the beginning, and a lot of people are just joining us now. There are many kind of stories. It's just one kind of story, and we're not going to have an exhaustive list of stories today. But there will be lots more resources for you to check out after the webinar as well in the next few slides. So here's an example of a parallel story. I really like this kind of mode because what you can do is you can say, okay, here's the story of one person or animal or place that here's what happened when we were there, and here's what happened when we weren't there. So, for example, the dog on the left, his name is Rex, and Rex was adopted by a man who said he had, 2 dogs and 2 cats. Well, the man actually had 15 dogs and 7 cats. He was an animal hoarder. And Rex was mauled by the other dogs, and he ran away down the street, and neighbors caught him and brought him back. But he had mange, and he didn't get treatment in time for his wounds, and he died. And it was really sad. And this all could have been avoided if our animal nonprofit had been there. And so then you say, well, how do you know? Well, here's an example of Sammy here on the right. Sammy is an incredible dog, and he was found wandering in the desert, just sort of very skinny and full of fleas, and they took him to the shelter, and then a man came there, and he took him home, and he only had one dog, one pet, and he treated him very well. And Sammy, lived to be 15 and just had the best life, walks every day, and was just a really good, happy dog. So there's two different stories. You have a parallel story where this is what happens when we're not there, so now you know the consequences. We have a happy story, but you need to know what happens when we're not there. And then you might want to put in a statistic like, there are over 10,000 dogs that need our help every year, et cetera, et cetera. So when you have a parallel story, you can really show people that there is a real consequence if they don't give to your nonprofit. So think about maybe how you could do a parallel story for your nonprofit. You could do this also very easily with two different people. So here are some further resources on story that I mentioned to you. I told you we weren't going to mention every single kind of story today, but these two books here that you're seeing, Wired for Story by Lisa Crone and Writing to Deadline by Donald Murray, are two excellent, excellent books about how to write different kinds of stories and even how to make an old story new again. I do have some blog posts about these books as well that sort of go into detail about what they say, and those are linked at the end of the presentation too. There's also On Writing by Stephen King, which I really liked, and it's about the practice of writing. I'd highly recommend it, but if you just want resources on different kinds of stories, then Writing for Story and Writing to Deadline are both really good. If anybody else has books that they like that taught them how to write a story, feel free to put that in the comments too. So what else can you write that will grab people's attention and make them want to give to you in your letter? A startling new fact, something that they're going to share with others. So, for example, 80% of police calls after dark are domestic violence related. When I worked at a domestic violence nonprofit, that's what we said. Another one that I heard recently, which was startling and interesting to me, was there is a nonprofit called Hope Inc., and what Hope Inc. does is it helps single parents finish college. And one of the startling facts that they share is that the average age of a single parent is 25 to 40, not 18 to 23 like you might think. And they said that's because they're most often people who plan to have children who were married and then who got divorced but wanted to finish their degree. So it's divorced older parents most often. It's not younger people who made a rash decision. So that's an interesting fact that she often tells in her speaking engagements. You could just as easily tell it in your letter and sort of stop people in their tracks and say, wow, this is a bigger problem than I thought it was. I had no idea that so many police calls are domestic violence related. This sounds like something we need to be doing something about. You can also start with a personal anecdote if you want to. Like, you wouldn't believe this, but when I was in college, and then you can go on and talk about your life a little bit. Or I was on the table, under the knife. So if you work at a healthcare nonprofit, for example, and you've had an occasion to kind of know a little bit what it feels like to be a patient, then you might be able to write this story. But even if not, you'd be able to interview somebody who has gone through your services and ask them if you can write it from a more personal perspective. And if you're worried about confidentiality, then make a mishmash of stories, and that way nobody gets too exposed. So don't underestimate the personal anecdote. It really makes a difference in terms of people being able to identify with your cause and hear what you're saying. Or a topical news story. Last month during the government shutdown, millions of women and children lost benefits. So this would be a good case for if you serve women and children who need WIC, this would be a good case for you talking about why there's such a big need for your services, that, this could happen again and people really need you. So I chose this picture on purpose so that you could see, hey, this is a real issue. And if you serve women and children, don't be afraid to use just a really attractive picture like this. So speaking of pictures, what are some good fundraising pictures? Pictures that show your nonprofit accomplishing your mission. So, for example, down here on the bottom, there's 3 pictures from the Global Autism Project. They go around the world and train autism therapists to help children with autism learn how to communicate with their families and help their families learn how to accept them. So this shows what they're doing and why it's so important. Sometimes these kids have never smiled before, never talked before. Sometimes they've been left out, in the cold, just standing in the yard because their parents didn't want them inside. Other times they've been subjected to exorcisms, and things like that because their families think that they're possessed, and their communities want to shut them out. So that's why, you can show the need a little bit and say, hey, this child has autism and the family beat him. But then, we came and we did really good stuff with these kids that had a really hard time communicating with their families and their communities. Here's some pictures that show the need as well. This is from Mercy Corps. Ongoing conflict in the eastern Congo has uprooted millions, and so we're helping supply water. So here's the need, and here's what we're doing about it. So you can see exactly what they're doing and why it's important right there in this picture. So good pictures of your cause are worth real money. You always want to be taking your camera and going around and taking pictures unless, you already have some, but you always need new ones to remind people why this is so important. And again, if you're worried about confidentiality, then I would definitely have a good photographer who could take pictures of friends or other people who could pretend to be the people that you serve. How can you make your mission more urgent for your donors? Well, aside from pictures, you want to make sure that you use the right verbs. So present tense will help people take action, and we're going to see this in the next few slides. I'm going to read you a little story that shows how present tense can be so powerful. You want to minimize adverbs, adjectives, and qualifiers. So that means, unlike me, you shouldn't say things like so powerful. You should just say powerful. You shouldn't say very important. You should say important. Or really exciting. You should just say exciting. Those are some of the things that you should do to just sort of make your writing more punchy and more real for people. You don't want to say things like, he had been going to the doctor for several years, and when he finally went, it's all past tense. You want to make sure it's present tense to make it even more urgent. So here's an example of an urgent story. I'm going to read it to you very briefly. What you hold in your hands is an instrument of torture. Go on. Tear it off the page. Hold it in your hand. Feel the point. Think about it. Stretch your imagination, because that's what torturers around the world do. They excel at it, using their imagination to fashion instruments of torture out of the most everyday things. So this was called the infamous pen pack from Amnesty International. You can see here how they actually have a picture of somebody with their eyes gouged out. This is a child from Guatemala. His ears and tongue were cut off, and this is what the police did to him to informers. The police claimed that they were not involved. So suddenly, the mission, even though it's really far away, is real for us because we're holding a pen, and they're speaking in very plain, sort of like directive statements. And it's all present tense, and they use really short sentences. And then they have different examples of different kinds of people who have been tortured. This is just one piece of the package, but I used it to show you just how powerful very short present tense sentences can be, as well as sort of like helping make your mission real for people who will probably never see it. Most of us are not going to go to Guatemala and see torture, I hope. But now this makes you kind of think, what can I do to help? And then they talk about other places in the world that also have this. Seoul in Korea, Indonesia, Sudan. So if you want to think about how can I make my mission more real for people, what could you do to help them use their imagination to actually have something tangible to hold on to about you? I'm not saying you have to have an image that's this disturbing, but think about what would make people take action. Remember in the beginning when we talked about they're much more likely to want to prevent a death than save a life. And if your mission is more about animals or the earth than about people, this is another very powerful image. It's a seal with a net around it, and it's not dead, but it's obviously not happy. So trash kills ocean life. That's the headline for this. And if you take nothing away from the whole letter where they write, you'll be able to see that, this is the main message of the letter. So if you could have an image this clear about what you're doing, that could be so powerful for your nonprofit. Something that clearly shows the need and what needs to happen. So Ocean Conservancy helps take the trash out of the ocean. And, it's pretty clear. So how can you make your mission this clear? Here's another one. It doesn't have to be super dramatic, but this is from Meals on Wheels Annual Report. I really love this picture, and I'll tell you why. As we know, in case anybody here doesn't know, Meals on Wheels helps people all over the country with getting food. And there's usually housebound seniors, so it can also be people who are disabled. So this person here, she sort of embodies what I feel is like the Meals on Wheels mission. She has just a great amount of hope in her eyes, but she also has a tremendous sadness. And she really, she just looks so beautiful. And for me, this person sort of encapsulates why they do what they do. So even if, you don't have a lot of really disturbing pictures about your cause, even a picture like this can make your mission more urgent for your donors. So think about, how, and what pictures that you could use to put in your letter. And I don't mean stock photographs. I mean real pictures. How could you help people want to give to you? So speaking of stock photographs, here's some common formatting mistakes. You can see here the stock photograph on the right. This is from Hope Inc. And this letter has a lot of things wrong with it. The paragraphs run together. The spacing is wrong. There's a tiny font, and there's no indentation. So it just looks like kind of a mess. I mean, there's some good things. There is a header. They do break up the text a little bit, but there's a lot of grant speak in here. According to Women Employed publication, Single Mothers in College Success, Creating Paths Out of Poverty. And then it has several different stories inside. This is a very common mistake that people make, which is I have to get my letter all in 1 or 2 pages, and so I'm just going to squish it up really hard. And I'm sure some of us are thinking, oh yeah, I've done that. Well, see, this makes your donor not want to read your letter at all. And the way that the picture kind of almost rolls over the text makes it seem kind of homespun and not very, not very well put together. So it doesn't really inspire trust in your nonprofit if you make an appeal letter this way. So here's how you avoid these mistakes. You can use bullet points, numbering, underlining, and bold-facing. You can also use varied type. You saw her use a little bit of that, but I'll show you more later. You saw that also in the Amnesty Pen Pack, too. They used varied type. You can use simulated handwriting in the margins or in the PS. Simulating handwriting just means you get a font that is a handwriting font, and if you want free fonts, go to fontsquirrel.com, and you can see lots of different free fonts, and there's tons of handwriting fonts that you can just add to your computer and use. Lines made of asterisks also helps you break up the text. Yellow overprint when you are highlighting text to emphasize it. I know it kind of looks ugly, but it really works. Screens, photographs with type running around it, and then subheads, lots and lots of subheads. The subheads don't even have to make sense. There's a wonderful book by Joseph Sugarman called, I believe it's called, let me look at my book here. Yeah, it's the Adweek Copywriting Handbook. I'd highly recommend you check this book out because it'll show you different ways to avoid these mistakes. And again, the author's name is Joseph Sugarman. So what difference does a header make? So if you look at the bottom of this, you wouldn't be able to really care very much about it. It looks like a newspaper article. This is from Amnesty International again. But if you look at the top, Brazil has solved the problem of how to keep kids off the streets. Kill them. Wow, that's powerful. Now I want to read more because this sounds like a serious problem. We shouldn't be killing kids. And so then you read it. This was written by Indra Sinha, and you can read the full text of it on sophie.org, and I'd be happy to send out a link to that as well. But the header makes such a difference in this letter that it's just so clear that you can't help but feel like this is powerful. I need to take action. And again, look at how it's present tense, and look at how it just sort of stands out. And it's a serif font. serif means that it has a little curlicues on the outside of it. Sans serif is like the writing that's in this presentation, how to avoid them. So when you're writing a physical letter, you want to use a serif font, and when you're doing an email appeal, you want to use a sans serif font. So here's how you resolve those formatting mistakes. Here's how the letter looked after we edited it. It has a clear header. Have you ever been caught in an impossible situation where it seemed like there was no escape? So it's shorter, it's to the point, has the word you in it, that's the second word, and it's clear. People have, like, yes, I can identify with this, even if I'm not a single mother trying to finish school, so what's next? Then you ask them to imagine. Imagine you're working 2 jobs with children to feed as a single parent. Sometimes you have to choose between food and rent. Sometimes you can't even afford a doctor's visit for your child. And maybe you stop reading at that point, but you see the picture, and then you see the quote from someone who must be the person above. I came across hope when I needed them most. My daughter was about to have brain surgery, and my rent was due along with my car note. Yvette. So you see how I indented here, so it's easier for you to read. It just sort of draws your eye along. There's small paragraphs. It's not like big, long paragraphs. There's no grant speak. It's a serif font, not a sans serif font. Before it was a sans serif font. Now it has all the curly cues in it. So that's how you do that. Now, talking about your accomplishments in a donor-centered way. Who is your donor? By the way, these are my grandparents, and they are in their 80s now. So statistically, your donor is most likely to be a woman over 60. So if you want to test your appeal letter, respect the opinions of the older women in your life. So you want to be saying, if we can go back to the slide here for a second, you want to be saying the word you. That's what donor-centered means. You want to say not we, but you. And you can do the you test in your letter and just circle how many times you say the word you. And for the 7% of you that are already done, then, hey, don't worry about it. But for the rest of us that haven't finished yet, try this. You can see here how many times I've said the word you in this particular letter. You're working 2 jobs, but you have dreams of a better life. You want a college degree. You work 8 hours at a job. You love your children. You get to the front door, and you have the eviction notice. You're at the end of your rope. Where do you turn? So you can see how many times I put the word you in here. Why did I do this? Because we're usually on the lookout for the 2 things in a sentence that tell us it's time to pay attention again, our names and the word you. So the same is true for your donor. You don't want to keep saying their name over and over and over again. I don't know if anybody here has ever experienced this, but when you're on the phone with a pushy salesperson, they keep using your name. It's just so annoying, and it just feels disrespectful. So you want to avoid that, but saying the word you is okay, and saying it in a donor-centered way means, thanks to you, we were able to accomplish this. Thanks to you, we can now have a better life. But without you, we can't do this. So please, won't you give again? That's how you can start to create more of a donor-centered appeal letter. So that's what a donor-centered way means. And if you're worried that it's not going to work, if you're worried you're saying you too many times, ask an older woman in your life, whether an auntie or a grandma or a mom or, somebody else. Ask them, does this feel like a good letter to use, or anything that you would change? So you want to focus on how the donor has changed the world for the better. And if you say, okay, but we've never emailed or mailed these people before, well, your year-end appeal should really have 2 separate letters for people who have given to you before, people who haven't. I, at the end of the year, would really only mail and email the people that have given to me before and ask them to give again. So that way you don't have to worry about thanking them for something they haven't done yet. So instead of saying, we took 50 kids out of homelessness last year, you say, you took 50 kids off the street last year, and now you can do more. So you want to make sure that you're thanking them and it feels true to them. It's not just sort of like something nice to say to someone and hope they're going to give to you. So that's what's called sort of a renewal list. And an acquisition list is when you have a new list that you bought from somewhere or you rented from somewhere, and you're just trying to speak to these people for the first time. Well, chances are very, very, very few that people are actually going to give to you. Statistics have shown that direct mail gets between a 1% and 3% return on average. So you're not necessarily going to get a lot out of those new donors, but for your renewal mailing, you'll probably get a lot more. So, for example, when I was working at the Austin Civic Orchestra, they hadn't done an appeal letter in 5 years. Our first appeal letter made like $1,500. That was in the fall. But then in the winter, when we did another one, it made over $3,000. So it made double that amount. So the more that you mail and ask your list, the more likely they are to give to you. And I know that seems counterintuitive, but it's true, and especially if you send them a letter, because now we're so used to getting emails, actually getting a letter in the mail feels like a very special thing for a lot of people, and there's a real opportunity there for us to explore as nonprofit fundraisers. So let's keep going. We want to keep on saying the word you. You know, couldn't you help us? You can take these for your letter if you want to. There is hope, and that hope is you, donor first name. Will you do this for us now? And then let's talk about putting it into practice now, and then we're going to take questions. So think about what's your missing piece. What story are you thinking of? And how are you going to take action from this webinar? This is the last poll question coming up right now. I will take action by, I'm going to keep it for about 20 seconds here, editing the graphic design of my letter, editing the story, finding a better picture, taking out the grant speak and most of the stats, or something else. How are you going to take action from the webinar today? So give me your answer. And remember, you can take all the webinars in the world, but nothing will matter and nothing will change for you unless you take action now. So let's close the poll and see what people said. Here's how people are going to take action. 11% said they're going to edit the graphic design. 54% said they're going to edit the story. 8% said they're going to find a better picture. 19% said they're going to take out the grant speak and most of the stats, and 9% said something else. Well, I'd love to hear the 9% what you're going to do differently, and please tell people what you got, maybe in the chat, and we can talk about that. Here are the resources for you. Here's the article about what motivates donors, how to write a story, how you can edit your appeal letter, the Tale of Two Cities with the dogs that I talked to you about, and that's in way more detail here. I have an e-course about everything I talked with you about today because it just seemed like there was just way too much to go over and not enough time. So I actually have a 4-week e-course where you can learn about all of this. If you go to wildwomanfundraising.com/YEgiving, you can read more, and if you want to learn more about that, you can go see it. And here are the books that I talked about, and here's where your bonus materials are from today. Here's where the slides are and a whole bunch of other goodies for you. wildwomanfundraising.com/store/YEgiving. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming today. I'd love to help you with your year-end appeal. Let me know what you're working on. Here's my email. Here's my phone number. And don't forget, here's where your bonus materials are right here. So thanks so much for coming, and let's take some questions. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mazarine. That was great. I was taking notes myself. We have a lot of great questions coming in, so let me jump right in.
Okay.
We had somebody asking about the percentage of what your appeal should reflect over, whether it should be all of the past year or should be forward-looking, a mixture of the both. What do you recommend?
That's a good question. You can talk about your accomplishments, but in a donor-centered way. So if this is your first communication to them after several months, update them for sure on where you are. But first of all, you want to tell a story because that's going to draw them in. Don't just say, in the past 12 months, we have blah, 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 because they're going to fall asleep. So instead, you want to say, this is the story. And then, you really don't want to make your letter do 4 or 5 jobs for you. It's important to think about, one communication, one purpose. So they probably do care what you've accomplished, but you should have been updating them with that in your e-newsletters or newsletters in the last 12 months. If you haven't been doing that, you're not going to get as good a result in your appeal letter. So just remember, no matter how many excuses you give to yourself, you need to do that e-newsletter or regular newsletter at least 4 times a year, if not more. And the same for your appeal letter. So tell your story and then say, thanks to you, we've accomplished these 4 or 5 things, but there's still so much more to do. Children like, Nala need our help, and you can help us help more children like Nala. So bring it back to the story. You can say a little bit about what you've done, but you really should have been saying that in other communications. Does that answer your question?
Gotcha. Yeah, that was great. We've actually had a few people ask this question. Is the trend moving towards online appeals or staying with direct mail?
Despite rumors of its demise, direct mail is definitely not dead. It is most certainly alive. And the reason you want to be doing direct mail and not just online appeals is because, hey, online appeals are so much cheaper, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you know, when you hold something in your hands, it creates emotional processing in your brain, and emotional processing is critical to giving. So you need to send out a physical letter. And you don't have to send it out to everybody. If your list is pretty big, but there's lots of people on there who haven't given in the last 3 years, forget them. Just send it out to the last 2 years' worth of donors. That should be more manageable for you. And send that out, send the appeal letter out, but then send out a reminder email, maybe 4 or 5 days later saying, hey, did you get our letter? Here's what it looked like. So people can be reminded that, oh, yeah, I was putting that to the side. Now I'm going to look at it. It's okay to use them in tandem, and I definitely would, but don't just send out an email and expect to get money. It doesn't work like that.
Right. Great. And somebody's asking about any recommendations or advice for dollar amounts for the ask. Should it be smaller amounts, larger amounts, monthly, annual? Do you have any insight as to that?
Sure. This is the trend in direct mail right now, is personalization. So I talked with, and the reason I know this is because I interviewed a guy named Paul Bobnak from Who's Mailing What Archives. And so Paul has been cataloging direct mail from not just the nonprofit industry, but from for-profit as well for the last 15 years. So he's basically a direct mail nerd. He is incredible, and I will definitely send you all his the interview I did if you're interested. But what Paul said was that you want to be able to say to people in your letter, and you can just do a mail merge for this field. If you don't know how to do a mail merge, we can talk about that too maybe later, though. But you can just make like an Excel spreadsheet with the first name, last name, address, city, state, zip, and then the last amount that they gave. So if they gave $25 last year, you could say, hey, thank you so much for your gift of $25 last year. Would you like to give $50 this year? The need is so much greater. It's really critical that you give now. So yeah, I would definitely suggest that you personalize it for your donors if possible. For some of us who are just starting out who have not so many donors, you could probably do it by hand if you wanted to, but doing it with a spreadsheet and mail merge is way easier. So I would personalize that as much as I could, because if somebody gave you $500, asking them for $25 is super lame. Like, hey, I just gave you all this money. Why are you asking me for so little? So that's sort of what I would say. You have to personalize it.
Gotcha. And when is the best time to send out a year-end appeal? Is it before Thanksgiving, after? When will it get lost in the rush of everything else?
Right. The very end of the year is not the best time to send out your appeal. You want to do it, I would say, no later than December 10th, because people are going away for vacations and see their family and stuff like that. But you can still send emails afterwards. Like sending emails out in the last 2 weeks of the year, sending 3 emails out in the last 2 weeks is a really good idea, just to keep people reminding them that you need them to give right now. And the more reminders you send, believe it or not, you are going to get some unsubscribes, but you're also going to get people giving to you more. And, interestingly enough, the most effective emails in the Obama campaign had the highest unsubscribes rate, and they had the most donations. So go figure that one out. And stuff that, worked for them for a while and stopped working, too. So you have to keep testing. You have to always be testing. So anyway, back to your point, what I would use Thanksgiving for is a chance to do a thankathon. So what a thankathon is, in case anybody here doesn't know, it's when you actually get people in your office together and you just call and thank the people that have given to you in the last year and say, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You're so incredible. I just wanted to call and say thank you, and that's it. And then you move on to the next person. And you can even leave a message if you want to. But that's how I would use Thanksgiving. Unless your nonprofit is focused around food, and then in which case, like if you're Meals on Wheels, then I would definitely, say, hey, this Thanksgiving, many seniors are not going to be able to have food. Won't you please give? I mean, that would make more sense. But otherwise, I would use this time in November to have a thankathon and just send thank you notes as well and phone calls. And then in December, I would ask. But there's no reason why you can't be getting ready, with all the little pieces, as you saw, letter, and then, getting the paper together and everything, and getting it all ready to go to get sent out and drop in the mailbox by December 10th. You should definitely be starting now if you haven't already.
Excellent. We have a lot of questions also from either arts organizations or more umbrella organizations that maybe don't deal with people directly but indirectly help people. Do you have some advice as to how to craft an appeal for those type of organizations?
Oh, sure. I've worked in arts organizations myself. One of the appeal letters I did for the Austin Civic Orchestra, for example. You can talk about if you're a music nonprofit and you're helping kids learn music, for example, talk about the one kid that you're helping. If you have a more general kind of focus, you could say, hey, we are breaking ground. This is the first, I don't know, for example, say what was one of the first things you did this year that was so exciting or powerful? Maybe like you played this new piece by a local composer that was really moving for people, or you help more people reach out and learn about your kind of music or art. If you're an umbrella organization and you have many different programs, that's okay. What you need to be doing right now is surveying your donors. So run, don't walk, to surveymonkey.com and just type in all the things your nonprofit does. Say, which one of our pieces of our mission do you care most about? Just write that one question. Do a one-question survey, send it to your list, and say there might be a $25 Amazon gift card that you can win if you fill out our survey. So when you do that, then you'll know what people really connect with about your mission. And then you won't have any worries about what you should write about. Then you'll know, and it'll take the guesswork out, and it'll take some of the stress and strain out. Like, what if I choose the wrong thing to focus on? So do that. And if you know the majority of people on your list care about, after you do the survey, if they care about one particular thing, then write a letter about that. For example, Hope Inc., the people whose letter that we saw, we did a survey of their people. And they're a brand new startup nonprofit. They started like 2 or 3 years ago. They really have very few donors, but what they do have is a lot of gumption and joy in what they do. And they do a lot of different things. They help people with rent. They help people with child care. They help people with getting to school. And they also help them with job training. Now, we thought that people would care about the rent and the child care. Well, we were wrong. According to our survey, they actually cared about the job training that Hope Inc. did more than other stuff. We were totally flabbergasted. But we said, okay, great. Now we know how to write our appeal letter. We need to focus on the job training and somebody who's gone through that and the job that they got. So then that's what we did. And we'll see this winter how that turns out.
Excellent.
Yeah.
In talking about following up with donors, where do phone calls, if at all, fall into the year-end giving strategy?
Good question. So what I like to do is first have that thankathon in November. Maybe like by mid-November have that thankathon. You can also have your board members call and say thank you, which can be way more powerful for people. And then send your letter by the end of November, beginning of December, and then call and email to follow up. So I would have a little phone-a-thon with your board members again saying, hey, did you get our letter? Do you have any questions? Would you like to give? And a lot of times people who are on the phone with your board members, they'll get really happy that a leadership volunteer called them. They'll say, wow, I was important enough for a board member to call. And even if you think, oh, but nobody cares about our board, or people aren't that engaged, it matters to your donors that your board member called them. So getting your board members to actually do a phone-a-thon with you instead of just any old volunteer can be very powerful as a way to follow up your appeal letter. So I would try to do that by the week after they get the letter, maybe the next few days, like on a Thursday evening, maybe on a Tuesday evening as well, just to make sure that you get somebody at home and ask them, would you like to donate? Did you get our letter? And then if they give, then call them and say thank you. Now, you don't have to call everybody. If you're a really big nonprofit, that wouldn't make any sense. But if you have, 10, 20 donations, call everybody. Or cut it off at a certain donation amount. Maybe if they give you under $20, don't call them. But otherwise, over a certain amount, give them a call and say thank you. Phone calls mean so much. You would not believe, with all of the special social media tools we have at our disposal today, phone calls mean way more to people than just about anything else, unless you have a personal meeting with them.
Excellent. Well, you touched on social media briefly. We have had some questions about the role that social media plays in year-end donating.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Social media is, you know what? It's good if that's where your donors are. But if your donor is a 60 to 80-year-old woman, is she necessarily on Twitter or YouTube? Maybe not. Maybe she is on Facebook, but she isn't necessarily going to be on, I don't know, Tumblr. So what you want to do is survey your donors and say, where do you go in the morning? Where do you go most often? Is it your email, your mailbox, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook? And then from there, you can find out where it would be most effective for you to reach out to your donors. So I would say thanking a donor on Twitter most of the time doesn't matter. They're not going to care. But sending them a note, a handwritten thank you note really would matter to them. That matters to them a lot more. So remember, when they hold something in their hands, it creates emotional processing, which is critical to giving. So how could you make someone really feel thanked? You know, if you really like somebody and you're, you know, in a relationship with them, are you just going to say thank you to them on Twitter, or are you going to call them and say, thank you so much? You did a really nice thing for me. Thank you. Or let's go out and have coffee. Let's learn more about you. Or, there's so many things you could do that would be more meaningful than a social media post. Even though social media is nice, if your donors aren't there, then there's not much point. I mean, go where they are. Don't go where you wish they were.
Gotcha. Great. It looks like we have time for one last question. Just a reminder to everybody on the phone, all the questions that we don't get to, Mazarine has offered to answer as many as she can for a follow-up blog post on trust.guidestar.org. For our last question, we're talking about the length of the letter and maybe what else to include, or should they include any information on other services they provide, any other background information on their organization in that packet.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever given because of a brochure? You know, I don't think I have.
Mm-mm.
No, me neither. So as tempting as it is to include your brochure and a number of other materials, you want to just include what is most effective for you. And so the most effective things, so studies are split on this. I asked Paul Bobnack about this. What you're talking about is called enclosures. So enclosures are what's in a year-end appeal letter, which is the direct mail that you send out. Some people who are really big nonprofits send things out, like if you're the American Diabetes Association sends out a pair of red socks to remind people to do foot checks. That's one of the things they used to send out. I'm not sure if they're doing it this year or not, but other people like Amnesty sent out a pen, but obviously it had a very specific purpose for them. Other things you could send out would maybe just be a sticky note on the letter. That, I think, is worth trying with certain donors that you and your board members know, writing a little note inside or on the bottom of your letter if you've got space to say, hey, thank you so much for giving this year. I was wondering, how you're doing. Let's catch up with coffee soon. That will mean way more to your donor than any little tchotchke that you could put in there. So you don't just want to give them something to give them something. You want to give them something that's meaningful to them specifically, and oftentimes a handwritten note on a Post-it or on the bottom of the letter will draw their attention more than other more expensive things. And I asked around about this. I'm like, well, because wouldn't it be nice if we could just include one thing that would just make our results go really well? Well, if you only get a 1-2% return anyway, it's not really worth it to add something really expensive. There's people have said, in certain what's called a grand control for example, the Audubon Society. It's like, hey, donate today, you'll get a free tote bag, or a free garden bag or something like that. Well, you could, but a lot of us are like, hey, I can't really afford a tote bag, and it doesn't really matter. Why people are really giving to you is because of the personal relationships you've built with them. So all the tote bags in the world aren't going to replace that relationship building. The other thing you can put in, which some people do, which may have an effect for you, is what's called a buck slip. And a buck slip is if you take a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper and you fold it into thirds, each piece of that third is a buck slip. That's the size of it. If you've gotten like a Good Nonprofits logo or a GuideStar logo, saying that you are a great nonprofits logo, saying that or a Better Business Bureau logo, saying that you're a really good nonprofit, you can put that on there. You can also put on like a little pie chart that says, that most of your money goes to the cause, et cetera, et cetera. Some people like to see that. So that's a way to sort of help people trust you more. But if you build a relationship, you don't necessarily need to do that. So that's something else you could put in on your buck slip, just sort of like testimonials like that. People saying, oh, this is such a good nonprofit, you should really give to them. They do so much. And don't forget your remit envelope. You should always have your remit envelope, but for some of us, that goes without saying. So a remit envelope is simply the envelope that they put the donation in when they send it back to you. It should be self-addressed to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So many thanks to you, Mazarine, for taking the time to be here today. We really appreciate it. Just based on the interaction, it looks like people got a lot of great things out of this. We hope that you did. And for all of you on the phone, thank you for taking the time to be on this webinar. We have a lot of exciting webinars coming up, including some that will be offered exclusively to our Facebook fans. So be sure to like GuideStar's page and keep tabs on our webinar at www.guidestar.org/webinars. And again, if we didn't get to your question, please check our blog at trust.guidestar.org and watch out for the email coming soon with the presentation and the recording. Thank you all so much and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.